founding chair of Learn Asia, a policy and regulation think tank active across emerging Asia. Really good to have you back with us. Firstly, this was largely expected. Wickremesinghe was the favourite among lawmakers, and that's despite a surge in support for his main rival. What do you make of this outcome? Is it good for the country?
Well, the political parties had fractured. So the question was how far they would fracture. And they didn't fracture as much as people thought. That is the reason for the result. I think there are pros and cons. The pros are that Mr. Wickremesinghe is an extraordinarily experienced and knowledgeable politician, and perhaps as an individual, the best equipped to handle the crisis and the negotiations. But on the other hand, because he came in, he was appointed by the previous and completely discredited president. He has aroused the opposition of a large number of people from the Aragalia, the struggle, the protest movement. Now, of course, the real challenge is whether he can cool them down, whether he can bring them into the conversation, and whether he can unite the country, because that, I think, is the most important thing we need to do.
And Rohan, we know that protesters had been calling for change in the lead up to this election by the parliament. Thousands of people took to the streets and occupied key government buildings. But we know Wickremesinghe is a six-time former Prime Minister. How is this result likely to be received by the people calling for change?
Well, they were somewhat confused because the principal opponent of Mr. Wickremesinghe was a member of the Rajapaksa cabinet and one of the closest confidants of Mr. Rajapaksa. He was nominated by the president of the chairman of Mr. Rajapaksa's party. So I don't know whether they had such a great choice on the other side. And the left-wing party, which had 3 members in parliament, got exactly 3 votes. That is, their 3 votes. So I think, the reality of it is that the Constitution laid out a procedure which said that it has to be somebody from Parliament who has to be elected.
Okay.
And these are the choices they had. Now, if there was a possibility, there were many, many attempts by people within and without Parliament to find a compromise candidate, if necessary, by bringing in a unifier from outside into Parliament. But, the leader of the opposition did not play the role that he was supposed to play in unifying the opposition. So I think he's the big loser today, more than anybody else.
Okay. We know that Sri Lanka is currently in the grips of a worsening economic crisis. Foreign reserves have dried up, leading to shortages of basic necessities such as food, medicine and fuels. So Ranil Wickremesinghe has a lot on his plate. What changes can we expect from the new president?
Well, he's a man who's quite focused on economic issues. And in fact, one of the key problems, which was cooking gas, which particularly affects the urban areas, I believe has been more or less solved. There's a regular supply of that coming in with funding obtained from the World Bank. Now, getting the economy running again requires that the fuel issue has to be resolved as well, because otherwise our exporters cannot get their exports to the port, and they can't get their supplies in, they can't get their workers to the factories and so on. And this is critical to the economic recovery. It's critical to repaying our debts. It's critical to all these things. So I believe that the government is already setting up a rationing scheme. I'm not a fan of rationing, but I believe that ordinary people have to take a bit of a backseat here and give priority to public transport, and to the vehicles that are transporting items essential for the economy. So we will be, I suppose, given a reduced amount of fuel so that the government can manage it. I think so. These are things that have been in the works and they're kicking in. There's a electronic rationing system that is just being tried out.
Okay.
So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make some progress in the next few days.
And as we heard from Smita there, some people are already protesting the outcome of this parliamentary vote. Do you think that general elections need to happen so then people can directly elect a new leadership?
Well, before the general elections, we need to have some things done because the previous president, Mr. Rajapaksa, brought in a draconian power centralizing constitutional amendment, which essentially made Parliament a dead letter. It had basically no function. So that has to be reversed. There is a draft constitutional amendment that was put forward by Mr. Wickremesinghe's cabinet maybe about 10 days ago. It needs some changes because it was put up even while Mr. Rajapaksa was there, and I guess he was hoping to continue. So there were some things that would have been favorable to him. But now that he's not there, I believe we can get the whole thing rolled back. That would be essential for the conduct of elections. Leave aside all the economic issues and the violence and all that stuff. The constitution had to be fixed, had to be restored to some semblance of a democratic constitution in order for elections to be held. So I believe that I have heard sitting MPs, party senior MPs in the opposition saying that how are we going to campaign if we can't even get back to our electorates? So the fuel situation has to be brought back to some level of normalcy. There's a paper shortage in this country. Elections require a lot of paper. Those things have to be resolved. So we think it should be held within a year at most. And during that period, we believe quite a number of hard reforms, such as selling off some of the money-losing state-owned enterprises, putting in a freeze on government recruitment, increasing taxes, which has already started. I think we need to get some of these unpopular things done with this government, with this parliament, rather than keep it for a future parliament, which will try to be more populist and will therefore scuttle the IMF agreement.
Well, there's certainly no shortage of issues to be addressed by the new president. Rohan Samarajiva, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.